Cam and Jameis, I think that they're going to have to wait till the draft to see how chips fall before they go ahead and get a gig. What do you think? What's the market like?
Yeah.
Right now?
Well, I mean, the one job that still seems to be open is the Chargers. And I know the Chargers are doing all of their homework on the guys who are going to be available. And so part of this could come down to who falls to them with the sixth pick or if they're willing to trade up. And, I mean, look, like, you know, having Tyrod Taylor there, if you're going to draft a guy that high, you sort of have a full quarterback room. And so if they weren't able to get somebody they like, with the sixth overall pick or through a trade up, then, you know, that would be an opening for one of those two guys. I think the biggest issue for both of them, though, is the fact that they can't go in and sit in a team facility and get checked out. You know, and with Cam, of course, it's physical. Where's his right shoulder at? You know, where's his left foot at? Like, how does he look physically? Teams want to have their doctors get hands on a guy like that. So that's a serious issue for him. And then with Jameis, I think as much as anything, it's wanting to sit down and kind of talk to the guy after his 5 years in Tampa and see where he's at mentally. And so I think for both those guys, they've really been hurt by the fact that they can't go into these facilities and sit down and talk to people. And I think it's, you know, right now it sort of leaves both guys in kind of a precarious situation where Cam's got to prove, after being the centerpiece of everything in Carolina, being the centerpiece at Auburn, being the centerpiece at junior college, that he can kind of, you know, exist as somebody who might be a little bit less than that, and he's got to prove he's healthy. And then Jameis, you know, I think the best thing for him may be to go to a place that's got a starter in place and an established starter in place where, you know, it's a stable franchise and, you know, he can rehabilitate his stock. Maybe something like what Teddy Bridgewater had to do under different circumstances, where he went to New Orleans, got really good coaching, and, you know, a couple of years later, having been there for 2 years really paid off.
Well, there's two other spots, too, where you look across the landscape and you got two second-year players who are seemingly the starting quarterbacks at their current spots right now. Mm-hmm. One with a lot more experience than the other. You've got Gardner Minshew in Jacksonville. Will they stick with him? And then there's Jarrett Stidham. I know they brought in Hoyer for the umpteenth time in New England. I mean, how will those quarterback rooms be affected by the next few weeks, do you think?
Well, let's start with New England. There's a very real kind of like timeline you can look through that sort of explains why New England may think they've got a first-round talent on their hands. And if you look at Jarrett Stidham's background, he was the number one high school quarterback in the country coming out of high school, right? He goes to Baylor, starts as a true freshman, plays well, and then, of course, the sexual abuse scandal blows up. So his coach gets fired, and he has to transfer. He transfers to Auburn, where they're running the offense that was built for Cam Newton, which isn't a great fit for him. So when the Patriots drafted him in the fourth round last year, they sort of looked at him as a distressed asset. You know, a guy who's got got great talent, great kid, checks off a lot of boxes, but didn't play that well college because he was in a situation that didn't fit him great, which really wasn't his fault if you look at the timeline of it. And so I think they do want to give him a shot. Doesn't mean they're not going to draft somebody, but if you look at it, it's, you know, his personal situation where he's at, his price tag, their cap situation, you add it up, and there's opportunity there for them to sort of come out of 2020 with real clean financials at the quarterback position after carrying a $13.5 million dead money hit on Brady this year. As for Jacksonville, I think that they are going to give themselves some insurance behind Gardner Minshew. I just wouldn't be surprised if it's not Andy. I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually Andy Dalton and not Cam or Jameis. And the reason why is because Jay Gruden's there.
Yep.
And Jay Gruden worked with Andy Dalton his first 3 years in the league. There's a very close relationship there. And we know the kind of guy Andy Dalton is, that maybe personality-wise he would fit behind a young quarterback a little bit better than the other two. And so I think, you know, you look at both those situations, and there could be opportunity if the bottom just falls out on either Cam or Jameis and the price is so cheap they have to look at it. But I think in both situations there's probably a different path that those teams are going.